How's it going? So my name is Melinda, Kachina Bige. Sezi Kachina Suyi, Ena Jenny Bige Uyi, Se Ka Thomas Bige Uyi, Setsi Isidore Thomas, John Thomas Uyi, Setsune, Mary Crooked Hands, Teresa Dume Uyi, Sedene Brandon Gabriel Uyi, Se Azi Seku, PYSS Isidore Uyi. So that's who I am. I work at KPU, and thanks, Janice, for having me as your moderator. And I just want to say that it's an honor to be your moderator today. Such incredibly spirited and hardworking people, obviously driven by otherworldly things. And it's been an honor to just sit here and hold this space for you. So I'm an associate dean in the Faculty of Arts. My colleague Dan Lett is in the audience, and we service arts and folks who are inside the institution. And that's just our day job. So I'm going to pass the mic to our guests. Well, yeah, I guess there's microphones right in front of you. There's glasses of water, so make sure you claim your glass of water now. I will hold the space. So just a couple of rules for this space. Be respectful with your questions. It's okay to be emotional if you have a question. We're on the unceded territory of Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and who else am I missing? Anybody else? And so this area is thousands of years old, belonging to these communities, and was a trade route for a lot of our people, so it makes sense that we would all be here. And the trade routes extended longer than 4,000 years ago, and that's how long Indigenous people have been here with intelligent and complex societies. So it's great to be doing this work again in that space. So the rules are that, be respectful. If you need to be emotional, that's okay. Please don't direct your anger at any of the panelists. And if you do, you might be asked to leave. And please keep this a safe space for our people. And and be respectful. So I'll pass off the mic to our guests to introduce themselves. Go ahead, Andrea.
Hi. Hi, my name is Andrea Crosta. I'm originally from Italy. I work all over the planet. I run an organization that I established, an NGO that I established about 12 years ago, dedicated to investigate environmental crime around the world. We go after the top environmental criminals on the planet using different techniques and different methodologies. And so that's, I hope I will be able to give a contribute on this awesome panel today.
Hasquile tanoyap, toits tanak quien quenchaman, sis quien sna. I am a bunch of things. Can't think right now. But yeah, I'm just really absorbing the amazing work that this incredible young filmmaker has just shared with us, and I'm really officially mind blown. I can't wait for the discussion to start because, just so many thoughts and feels, and I'm just really humbly grateful for the work you do. It's important. Miranda and I kept whispering through that we had so much to talk about, and because it's inspiring when you start to see, and I'll put it into this context. One of my many things I do in my life is weave, and so I'm still a very early weaver, in my opinion. 6 years, it's a very small time. I've been told by elder weavers it's 25 years before you can become a master weaver, so I'm still a baby right now. And I'm okay with that, but the reason I bring that up is that you look at films like this and you really feel like that other level of weaving and how we bring important things together to bind us and to hold us and to, you know, remind ourselves that in these struggles that are so brutal and hard to take, that we are collectively tied together in the most important ways. And yeah, again just feel really grateful for KPU inviting me to be here today on what just feels like such an incredible day of some really important work. And, you know, just I started out in filmmaking a long time ago, and for me, there's so many filmmakers here, it's very competitive, but I've continued using a lot of those tools in different ways. So I just have so much appreciation for the work it takes to even weave one of those stories together in your film, but to bring them all together. So I'm going to wait till we get into the discussion. But yeah, just really grateful for those of you who are here today, because, oh, yeah, it's sunny out there, and that doesn't happen until the heat wave hits in Vancouver now. So-called rainy city, not so rainy anymore, but really appreciate seeing faces in the audience, because when people are making important works like this, if people aren't seeing it, what are we doing? You know, we need these stories to be shared, and I really hope that each and every one of you goes out and talks about what you saw today and what you heard and what you, if you didn't know these things, to help educate those people in your communities.
Is that better? Okay. Hey, Yat Aisha Ivey Camille Manybeads Tso. I would do the full introduction, but it's really long, and honestly, I stumble over it a lot. And so to keep my embarrassment level down, I just do the beginning. Traditionally, we say our introduction in new territories and new places to let those who are from here, and also as well as the land and the water and the sky and everything, know that we're here. It's asking for acceptance, as well as giving respect at the same time. So I'm just very excited to be here. Thank you all so much for coming out. Let's see how this goes. Your turn.
Sego Tanse, Angel Brant Yungets. I am Cree from Opaskwayak Cree Nation, but I was adopted at my early age and grew up in Tyendinaga Mohawk Territory, which is out in Ontario, and I've been an uninvited guest here for 3 years, and I work for Indigenous Climate Action as the Youth Engagement Coordinator. And so I work with Indigenous youth across the country to help amplify their movements, programs, and get them the funding that they need in order to make disruptions such as the people that we saw on film. And we also work with Indigenous communities to help them understand their rights and sovereignty within their own nations and bring their voices to platforms such as these, international platforms like the Conference of Parties, which, we can interrupt spaces like that by talking about Indigenous policy and how we can disrupt that space by just being there. And, you can't do anything without us because we are the Indigenous people of the land. And so what's brought me into this work was I worked with the City of Toronto and the University of Toronto to help with Indigenous consultation matters on park programming. And so what I really noticed was that Indigenous consultants weren't actually being approached until way later into the project, until everything was decided upon and the agreements were made and they were going to go forward. But the last checkbox that they needed to tick was to talk to Indigenous communities. And so that not only disrupted their lands, it disrupted their culture and their way of living. And this is just a microcosm of things that can happen in and around outside of the city. And so even in Tyendinaga, I've seen many, many effects within my own personal family and within my community as a whole. And so this has just really brought me into this work, and it's films like this that really inspire me. And you know, Indigenous climate action has really wanted to expand its reach internationally, and so this, I think, would just be, it would be amazing if we could achieve some level of what you've done to bring voices, to amplify those voices on a platform like this. So thank you.
Cooksham. Secwépemc Uluch. My name is Miranda. My Indian name is Little Fawn. I come from the interior, the Salishan people. It was an excellent, well-documented film. It was really how to bridge the gap between what's going on here to the Indigenous peoples all throughout. And one of the pieces that I saw was in Colombia, when the government was actually the ones who were imposing all of the mining extractions and so forth in the territory. And this is the first time in so-called Canada history where Canada actually bought a pipeline, and that's a Trans Mountain. And so they want to govern the people, at the same time prosecute the Indigenous people all throughout. And so within Canada history, this is the first time that Canada actually bought into something that is full ownership, that is displacing the peoples all throughout. So the connection is real. The storytelling, the truth-telling, the stories, the lives that you share are all of us. And so it was really touching to see that be put into, like we were talking about the food all throughout the film, and the kids and the laughter and community. And it was just like very well put together. So I'm very honored to be here today and come and meet you and see the films and just to interact and you know, we're always looking for what draws us to be in a certain place at a certain time, and the interconnectedness we need to bridge the gap. You know, how we close that in, and what we say is we're not just intentionally here for like just our beings. We people come into our lives for a reason, and so I really think of that as you know, seeing the film and bridging those gaps between that and that almost like celestial world, because it's like what affects us here affects us down. And the other part is that those mining companies are the same shareholders that hold shared space within Vancouver area, Toronto, and so forth, all the way out to Montreal. So those shareholders, the banking corporations, and those larger subsidiaries actually are colonizing the peoples all throughout, and then in this fair trade they call. So when we're looking at that under the, not just a conspiracy theory of the New World Order, but actually what it entails and how that all comes together, is those same corporations, shareholders, and stock exchange holders, and the whole monopolization of Canada, and not just Canada, but all throughout these corporations and the mining companies that are monopolizing people's lives. So thank you. I really enjoyed the film, So Cooksham.
Oh, I was just going to say, do we have any questions so far from the audience? So I see a question. Thank you. I was like, is there a person? There's a person. There's a person. And there's a mic. Hi. Go. If you don't mind,
Sorry.
please introduce yourself, say your name,
Sorry, I don't want my picture taken.
and then ask your question.
No photos, please. Okay, thank
Sorry.
you. Yeah.
Sorry. My name is Simran Atwal, and I really enjoyed the film. I go to KPU. I'm a KPU student. I just had a question about if you guys know how we can, because with the pipeline being built here, what we can do what I can do as a student, what I can do as a student basically to get more involved with like the pipeline they're building here. I guess not.
The resistance?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not really good at public speaking.
You're doing great.
Like what more can I do as a student? I want to like be a part of this and okay.
Thank you, Simran. That's a great question. Anybody want to take that one?
I feel like I need to defer to y'all because y'all know
Yeah. Indigenous climate action.
Okay.
And
Yeah, it is to answer that is wherever you are impacted in that surrounding area, there's Indigenous people-led organizations. So here is Tuelatooth, and the George family has actually been very instrumental in my life as opposition to a pipeline owned by Canada. And not just the George family, but others who live within the territory that we're seated on, right? So wherever you are, and this goes out to the virtual portion, is that you need to go and find out the land base within that area, wherever you live, because you have to start maybe in your backyard by impacted, environmental crisis that the people are in the surrounding area. So, and I'm not just talking about environmental crisis. I mean education, schooling, the language. We talked about language and so forth. There was so many things like community kitchens, gardens, so forth. There's so many things that you actually are making impact by changing the way the environment within that surrounding area is. So, if that answers your question, but.
I guess I can answer as the youth engagement. So what we often see is youth come to Indigenous climate action having no idea sometimes what climate change even is. And so not saying that you don't know what that is, but we do have resources available at Indigenous climate action, like the toolkit. We also have a train the trainer type program where you can get trained on how to present about climate action and the effects that it's having in Indigenous communities, maybe your own community. And then once you feel confident enough and ready to share that, we provide that resource to schools, to communities, in the public to attend a panel that you might want to put together or a presentation. And I think just another way is, I know it's very slow moving, but engaging more in the policy work. We're seeing a lot of Indigenous youth really want to input their voices in policy that is upcoming in the next election or the election after that. And so you really need to start showing up into those spaces, bringing your friends or just advertising it on social media to take up that space, because if there's no youth in the room, then how is the next generation going to speak up for us? Because this is all of the older generation's mess that we're kind of cleaning up here. And so we really have this big responsibility, and it can be a lot. But I would just say it starts with something small, and whether that's, making a poster and showing up to a march, or whether that's making a post on social media, or just reading a book on more education on how you can make impacts of Canadian activists that have made movements, make a film or do something of that nature. So it can seem small, but each little incremental movement is a movement towards positive change.
That's great. And to Miranda's point, in the backyard of the George family, the Raven Trust is a good organization to start with locally here and the work that they're doing. If anybody else wants to answer.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I see resistance as several different points happening on the scale at all times. There's frontline work, which is super important, super impactful. That's a lot of what was in the film, was frontline defense. There's also policy reform. If you want to get into government, that's totally fine. If you want to go into education, become a teacher, teach the younger generations, teach even older generations going back to school about these different things. I also see that a lot of it, and probably the most important to me, and that's not saying that this is right, but is community work. With the development of the nuclear family and separarization that has happened within communities here in Canada and in the United States, and frankly everywhere that there has been colonization, the idea that we are separate has become first and foremost among a lot of those conversations. So taking that away, deconstructing that. There's this term decolonization that's used pretty often, and I opt not to use it. I opt to use re-indigenize, because decolonization means that we have to take something away, we have to remove something. Re-indigenize means that we're bringing back, we're bringing forward something more, and that's how I want to go about in the world. And so when I say community-based, I mean small impacts, something as important up here in a place that is as cold and wet as it is up here, is something like carrying around a clean, dry pair of socks could help save someone whose house is on the street tonight's life. Did you accidentally make too much spaghetti, in your apartment building, and know a single mom who needs help babysitting or with food, or all of these other aspects that open and break down the idea that we are singularly the most important thing in the world, and bring it into this sounds so cheesy, oh my God, we are the world. I'm so sorry, I've literally never said that. But it's about remembering that we are all connected, from, those weeds that seem to break through on the sidewalk that people complain about, even though I think they're really pretty, or just sitting here in this amazing panel with these incredible people who have different things that they're going forward. And then even just every single person here in this room tonight, we're building community being here right now. If everyone were to make one new friend tonight, you've got such a stronger and larger community to go with. And that's where resistance really comes from. My uncle recently passed away at the beginning of this year, and he was a very well-known activist and incredible person. And being at his celebration of life ceremony, it was the largest event that my town had ever seen. People came from all over the world to come see his passing and to come give him love. And one of the last conversations we ever had was that he'd felt alone, and he felt like no one was there. But seeing that, it was a reminder that we're all in this together. It's about becoming a for people movement as opposed to a for profit movement. And so I think for me, it will always be community. In Navajo, which is, where I am, we have this thing called ke, and it's our foundational value, and it means relationships. It's the best way to describe it in English, but that doesn't even give enough power to the word. But here, what we're building right now is ke. All of you and I and everyone up here have built ke. We have ke. You're a part of my family now. And in that, so I am fighting for you and you are fighting for me, and together we are all fighting, for a world in which everyone has housing and everyone has food and everyone has clean water, but also everyone has care. And I think all of that is super important for movement. So if you don't want to get up on a stage and talk to a whole bunch of people, if you don't want to go out and do certain things, there are other ways to be just as important within these movements.
I don't even know how I can add anything to what's been said, but I agree with it all. And I know that when you come to that place where you become aware of things other than in your own world, it can seem like you've just been living in a bubble, and how could I not know that this stuff is going on? But for Indigenous people, we're used to people actually sadly saying things like that to us, because this whole continent's been very good at hiding the shameful ways that Indigenous people are treated. And, in this city alone, I just think about, there's so many spaces on the land where, the work that gets done here, a lot of the resistance movement, you look at the February 14th March for the Missing and Murdered people used to just be for the women. And literally when I first went to one of those marches, there was 7 of us standing on Main and Hastings, and nobody liked us at all. And it was awful. But we went around to all the places that women had been murdered violently. And it really woke me up to just how things were happening right in my neighborhood, that this was atrocious, you know, and I was like in my late teens, and it was like mind-blowing to me that these acts could happen. And then I look, you know, now all these years later, and I see 20,000 people in the march. I can't deal with crowds like that, so I don't go, but I definitely, in my own way, acknowledge that day, and I think about, you know, what does love mean to us, and how do we face those issues. But as everybody has said, community is where it's really at. And like myself, I have a lot of commitments to my family, and like my mother's aging, so I can't get out and I can't go protesting or standing in resistance places, because my mother literally would die like by herself, you know. And I'm not trying to sound ominous, but that's the reality in my world. But it doesn't stop me from doing things. I'm still gonna I'm gonna write letters. I'm gonna send money to people on the front lines. I'm gonna you know, whatever I have to do. I'm growing food for my community, which I have been doing for 15 years. And even people within my community have hated me for growing food. You know, like it's sad that there's so much traumatization in our communities that it can stop us from actually moving forward. But it's all about our own selves taking that first step and taking it. And if it's about taking it in a comfortable route for yourself, it's okay. Don't feel guilty about it. Just move. It's better. The whole idea of what we're all doing, we refer to it as the movement. So the movement involves moving. So get up and do what you're driven to do. You know, like even when we had the cold spell in January, I just sat around for a couple of days before the cold snap hit here. And I know a lot of people make fun of Vancouver, saying, oh yeah, you get snow in winter for a day or 3 days. But, you know, like 36 people died on the street in January on that weekend because the mayor of the city doesn't care about people. And he disrupted all the spaces that people could be safe. So, you know, I can't do much, but I made bannock and I made soup and tea, and a friend of mine went around with me with our wagon, and we gave food out to like people, and some of them were crying. They were like so high and wasted, and they were like, "You're feeding me?" And I'm like, "You deserve to eat," you know. And it's like those are the spots in our own humanity that we have to actually. I've been told by all my elders, if you really want to know who you are, you go down on the street and you meet people. And, you know, and yeah, it's not an easy thing to see people living in that way, but it's happening right. When we talk about our backyard, it is happening right here. And, you know, the things that we have to face as Indigenous people, as queer, two-spirit, trans folks, everybody, all of us, people of color, we all have things that we're carrying. We all have a suitcase in a sense that we carry, and there's trauma in there. And how do we address it? How do we move beyond it? And it comes back to what everybody said, community. If you don't have a sense of community, build it. You just build it. And you start like from the moment you're aware of it, and you say, I'm not gonna do this alone. I'm gonna do this with other people, and I'm gonna make myself a bit uncomfortable sometimes because maybe I'm too comfortable. And it's not to say it's a bad thing to be comfortable, because I think too few people are, especially people in all the facets of what we've seen today. You know, people just trying to have a home, trying to cook. I want to say that I loved that every one of the communities you visited, you really focused on the food. It's the best. It's totally the best. And I was just like, look at that food. And it immediately transported me to those places, because I looked at what they were eating, and I wanted to imagine the smells and the taste and the smell of the smoke. And, what was the atmosphere in each place? You know, you left when you were in the beginning in your territory. It was not very cold, but it was probably starting to get cold. But when you returned, there was snow, and you had to see that passage of time in your film, right?
Real honest, that was not the correct timeline.
Yeah, but
We worked on it for 9 years. There was a lot
9 years. Okay, I should have known that.
there was a lot of little moments.
But you focused on the land and the people and the food, and it brought you into a sense of the different. It didn't even matter if it was a timeline. What it mattered was that you showed people in different contexts of living through different seasons, through, you know, extreme measures of like, well, I'm gonna go up and see what's happening with my sister. Oh, her and her kids were all murdered, and here they are. You know, like that's what the reality is for a lot of people. And it's not just happening all over the world, it's happening here, because we look at the missing and murdered people, and they're not like criminals. I mean, people like Colton Boushie, he wasn't a criminal. He was murdered point blank, and his murderer was praised, and people raised money to make sure he stayed out of jail. And courts, it was very Mississippi rising there. Let's just load the jury with all white people, and let's like slam these natives, you know, like let's shame the mother that raised that boy that had to be murdered. It's like we're never given a break. And so it can be happening in the Philippines, it can be happening right here, and I know in your territory it has continued. The stories are horrific, and I've read a few, and I have to sit and heal myself when I hear these stories, because we get too comfortable here. So part of that need to get up and help is from being too comfortable for too long. And it's okay to be a bit uncomfortable, and you don't have to throw yourself into the resistance and jump to the front line, but every act is resistance. Me growing food in my community is an act of resistance. It's also, I loved what you said, you know, the re-indigenization. And that's, for me, my work is bringing all kinds of young people onto the land and showing them not only what plants are, but how to grow them, how the ecosystems are connected, how to bring back our ecosystems. Because we've just watched how much of the world gets destroyed, and we really literally have only a third of the natural world left on this entire planet. And people here in this city, I've listened my whole life to people complain about the rain. And last year there was no complaints, other than from me and other gardeners. It's 5 days of rain in 5 months in one of the wettest cities in North America. And you know, like that is what all this resource extraction, that ties me to the Philippines. It ties me to Colombia. It ties me to all the jungles where all of these resource extractions are happening. It ties me right back to Burrard Inlet, where my people live next door to Tsleil-Waututh. And those people in that community are all of my relatives. I know how they're related to me. I can go into any of their homes and look at their genealogy and point out all of my ancestors that are connecting us. And that is because I was trained by my mother and by her father and so on. So we were all trained to know who we are, where we're from, and why we're here and why we're interconnected. And so never feel bad about just wanting to get into it. Do it. Just do it. That's my, you know, steal that from Nike. Just do it. I'll be as cheesy as you. We'll spread the cheese. Anyway, did you want to share anything?
Do you want to answer the question?
My suggestion is to study and know your enemy as much as possible. Okay? The reason why I established Earth League International more than a decade ago is coming from was not just because I was born with a huge love for wild places and wilderness, but it's also coming from many, many years in the high-tech sector. I understood that my contribution could have been to bring more professionality into this field, okay? And I can support resistance, I can support activism, I can support advocacy, which are crucial, with a different kind of mentality and a different kind of action, more focused on who is my enemy, okay? And so it's this really are really complicated matters that this beautiful film shows, and you should not be afraid of complexity. You should embrace complexity. You should study complexity in order to find the right pressure points, and then you will act on the right pressure points. If you go back now to the film, Glencore is a Swiss company, okay? So here we have the first responsible, the Swiss government. The most important, the major shareholder of Glencore is the Qatar government. Here's the second responsible, the Qatar government. The second biggest shareholder of Glencore is a billionaire from South Africa. BHP is an Australian company, okay? So you, as they say in America, you have to know your shit if you want to fight back in a right way, okay? And that's what I do in my job. So my suggestion is know your shit and then start fighting.
Can I just add to that? To the know your shit type thing. I went to recently a carbon markets training course, and that's somewhere I really just don't want to be. But as someone who is learning more about carbon markets, mechanisms, and the way that they are false solutions, I decided to go to this conference. And they point blankly laid it out how they were going to sell this to Indigenous communities like real estate, and how they were going to pay off Indigenous communities large sums of money that they could just not ignore. And I just listened all day. I just listened, wrote things down. I felt like I was undercover, a secret agent. But that really brought a lot of information back to my community, and it's now informing a lot of training that's going on within Indigenous climate action around false solutions, and how we can train our communities to better educate themselves about these people who come with the golden ticket, promising them luxury, luxury items at the cost of their land. And so, yeah, I just wanted to thank you for sharing that.
Amazing. Okay, so what we have 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes left.
One more question.
I see her question. I'm just starting my timer. Actually, hold on. I'm going to start a 5-minute timer.
Questions, and we try to answer them both in 10 minutes.
Is there 2 questions?
Not the same person.
Okay, so I saw Simran put her hand up, but there's 2 questions over there. Is it okay if we move on? Okay. Yes, someone's finding you with a mic. So, you got a mic. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Just say your name.
Whoa, this is weird. Sorry. My name's Lauren. I really loved your film. Something that I really noticed on top of the importance of food between all the communities was the use of music throughout the film. And I was just curious, kind of your process of choosing which music to use throughout, and like what was sourced, already made, what was written specifically for the film, etc.
That's music and...
Yeah, okay. So my composer is Daniel French. He is the bomb. I love him so much. He is Lakota Dene. He's also YU. He had connections to every single location. When we were hiring our composer, there was actually a guy up in Canada. I think it was something like Something and Rye. I don't remember, but he's a musician from up here who does a lot of work with Indigenous communities in the area, but he's a white guy. And then there was Daniel, who literally his aunt had just come back from Mindanao. He had connections to every single location. And he's got a fantastic band called Las Cafeteras. He's based out of LA, but absolutely insane. And I'm gonna be real honest, it took probably an extra 9 months to a year just to get Daniel's sound in. With the other guy, it probably would have happened instantly. This was Daniel's first time composing a film on this level, and it was worth it. He's phenomenal. Oh my God, I love him so much. You should check out his band. We've been trying to get the soundtrack up on Spotify, but you know, he's native, so he's on his own timeline.
Spotify.
Yeah. I was like, oh, it's this whole thing. But I do want that last song. I don't know. I love the soundtrack, but most of the soundtrack was made for the film. The song in the Philippines, obviously done on site. What we got told at first was that was a traditional song, and then when we got back and finally had it translated, because we try to go through 3 to 5 different translators for each language, just to really make sure and get as close as possible. That was not what it was. It was, hey, I'm giving you a warning. Jordan is my producer. So they were like, Jordan, we are watching you. That's what the song was, but it was still beautiful. And then, obviously, yeah, they were like, we got told, they were like, this is just like a blessing. This is just, no, it was literally saying like, Jordan, if you fuck this up. And I was just sitting there like, and Jordan's sitting there like, and like later on, Jordan was like, oh my God, did I get threatened? And we were like, you're fine. Yeah, like we didn't even know
something right when
we didn't even know where we were in the Philippines. Like honestly, like we just got driven around, partially for like NPA's security as well. Like, but we had no clue. It was just a wild time. But yeah, so those songs were obviously there, and then the opening song is the AIM song, the American Indian Movement song, and that is sung by my cousins, who they have a band called Blackfire. Well, they used to have a band called Blackfire, and then there was like a falling out that happened like a decade ago, and then it became Klibanali and Sehasen, but that was from the last album that they did, and they gave me rights to their songs like a long time ago, so I just keep using them.
Awesome.
Yes.
Good connection
That's
to
the
have.
music. Yeah. No, I love that. So Klibanali is my uncle who passed away. And actually in the film, so you see LaDonna, since filming, has passed away. Louise Goy, since filming, has passed away. Klee, who sings the opening, that's his voice that you hear in the beginning. He passed away January 30th, or December 30th. Just literally, really, he taught me film. I learned film from him when I was 9. Ooh, okay. Don't cry, I got this. And then Danny Blackgoat, who is the man who is doing the string games. Traditionally, we only do string games in the winter. He's since passed away. And his mother, Roberta Blackgoat, used to have a gigantic wheat pasting of her up in the Smithsonian in D.C. of the Museum of the American Indian. Wow. And we got to show there and screen there a month after he passed away in that same room where his mom was put up. So I think we like returned him back to her in a weird way, even though it's not our territory. So I think in this line of work, we see a lot of loss at times, but we also see a lot of beginnings, you know? I've gotten to see in Oaxaca, they're doing the community wind farms, and we've been able to put them in touch with several groups in northern Spain that are actually being affected with wind farming, and they're being displaced because of it. And which is something that you don't really think about, like Spain, you're like, that's like a super colonizer country. They wouldn't do that to themselves. They do. Yes. And so we've been able to put them in touch with the folks in Oaxaca, and then in Colombia exactly a year ago to I guess in this time last year, we were in Colombia and I met a guy who is an engineer, but his specific thing that he works with is green steel, because steel is 8% of our carbon emission problem, and that's one of the reasons why wind farms aren't as sustainable as we're like sold for them to be. So he works specifically with green steel, so he's helping to get the communities in Oaxaca and now northern Spain green steel in order to be able to create their own community wind farms. So we see a lot of loss, but we see a lot of beginnings. Yeah, that was a random.
Nice.
Check out Daniel French.
I know, that's so good. That's so good. There's just one more question. We got 4 minutes left, so I want to make sure we answer this question. Do you want to raise your hand, the second person? Yeah.
I'm Harry. Thanks for this very important topic of a forum you're driving. The quote, or I guess the report about Peabody forming a tribal council, how did that work? Was it, well, anyways. And the second part is only in the last decade I've been aware of international you know, Indigenous leaders from international parts of the world getting together. How's that going, and could there be more of that?
Nice questions.
I think the answer is tied together in both in a really simple way. So Peabody Coal and BHP did something that at the time, like, I hate it because it was a really smart move, is they found a community that was isolated, that did not have a large voice, and they continue to do this. This is where we see happen everywhere. It's easier to hurt people who are not as loud. With the formation of like social media and these other things, we're really seeing how that's changed. Standing Rock really like changed the game for a lot of Indigenous protesting and how we work together in that sense. Especially Standing Rock was not being reported by newspapers at first. I know that not just me, but probably everyone up here knew about Standing Rock months before, you know, the rest of the world did. And it really happened through social media that the rest of the world found out, and people started paying attention. And so we see that happening. And so Peabody Coal did something, again, kind of smart, but I hate that it was like smart, but which is they took an isolated community that was very separate, like Black Mesa is only an hour and a half from Flagstaff, 3 hours away from Phoenix, 4 hours away from Las Vegas, like these massive places, but there's no running water, there's no electricity still to this day. Even getting like cell service out there is really hard. So now we have a lot more connections, but most people don't have like a Facebook or anything to even get on social media because they just don't have it. So they built a community subgroup similar in the way that the federal government of the United States did, which was they created we are all completely run in the United States by BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, which should tell you a lot since it's still called Indian Affairs. And they run all of our governments. They dictate our laws, they dictate our education, they dictate our healthcare systems, they dictate what's taught in school, they dictate every single thing about us. So we are technically sovereign nations, except for all of our tribal governments were created by BIA and the federal government. So all of those people, even while looking like they're voted in, are handpicked and chosen. Even the requirements to be able to run for office are handpicked by the federal government. We have no say in who is even allowed to run for office. And that's what Peabody did in the coalition. They chose a group of both Navajo and Hopi who are, this sounds weird today, but we call them progressives, as opposed to the traditionalists. So the traditionalists are those of us who are Indigenous who want to keep our traditional roots, and the progressives are those who want to move into the Western world. Yeah, and so they handpicked progressives in the region, folks who had either not grown up on the reservation or had opted to leave the reservation and get schooling in specific fields, such as like energy. And I think that's one thing that's often overlooked is people coming from these places who, decide to work for their mines or decide to work for these things. I don't think that they're wrong or uneducated, or I think that they've been sold propaganda, and they're continuing to live that propaganda. And that's how those coalitions were picked, and that's how they're still picked to this day.
So you brought us right to time. Oh, sweet. Way to go. Nicely done. So that's all the time that we have for now. I just want to say thank you to our panelists. And if you could kindly oblige me, may I provide our audience with action items?
Oh my God, yeah, please.
Are you okay with that? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so everybody who sees this film is held responsible for action. And so what that means is that when you leave here, your responsibility is to connect with the communities that we saw in the films. So we had the Wayuu, the Mandoan. Did I say it right?
I don't remember.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. And the Bland people, the Blonde people, and the Zapoteca people.
Zapoteca is different. There's Zapotec
Gracias.
and Bige.
Yeah, thank you. Zapotec community. And also the Dene Navajo Nation. In addition to that, your responsibility is to know the corporations that are trying to colonize and take from that land. And the corporations are BHP, Itepa, and Glencore, and Peabody. Yeah, I wrote those down. I was missing Glencore. Thank you. Oh no, what was I missing? It wasn't Glencore, Peabody, BHP. That's the one I was missing. Thank you so much. So your responsibility is to know all of those organizations and to learn as much as you can about them. And if one of the things, if the only thing you can do is provide financial support to the Indigenous communities that you have seen, then do so. If you cannot do that, then education is your tool, and just keep moving forward. Thank you for being here, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you to our moderator.